Welcome back, everybody. We are about to watch Napoleon almost blow it in Italy. French patriots got fired up there. This is the next part of the Napoleon in Italy series from Epic History. They do great with these. I'll have the link to the original video in the description box below. Go check them out, give them a like and all that, but let's jump into it.
An Epic History TV PMF Productions collaboration. In 1796, at the height of the French Revolutionary Wars, a young French general took charge of a ragged, demoralized army in northern Italy. It was his first command. Many expected him to fail. Instead, in just 1 month, he won his first brilliant campaign. With astonishing self-confidence, boldness and energy, he led his army to victory after victory, transforming the war in Europe, winning praise from a grateful republic, and forging a legend. This is the story of Napoleon Bonaparte's first campaign, and the dawn of a new age.
Yeah, and it really is the start of everything Napoleon. I mean, every time you turn around from here on out, he has given Austria that work. So it's the beginning.
October 1796. 6 months have passed since General Napoleon Bonaparte took command of the French army of Italy. In that time, he's led a series of brilliant operations against the Austrians and won a string of battles. Now he appears close to final victory. He's driven Austrian field forces off the plains of northern Italy, back towards the Alps, while his troops have the great fortress city of Mantua, the key to Italy, under close siege. Mantua's oversized Austrian garrison is nearing starvation and riddled with disease. Napoleon appeals to its commander, Field Marshal von Wurmser, to surrender. The brave should be facing danger, not swamp plague, he jibes. But Wurmser is a tough old veteran. He will not yield while any glimmer of hope remains. And he knows that to the north, Austria is gathering fresh troops to march to his aid. True, many are Grentz battalions, a type of Habsburg frontier militia, poorly drilled and short of officers. But they help raise the strength of the Austrian field army to 44,000. And they have a new general to lead them, Feldzeugmeister, or Lieutenant General, Józef Alvinci. The 61-year-old Hungarian was once military tutor to Emperor Francis himself, and is regarded as diligent, sharp, and brave. He and his staff draw up plans for a fresh offensive to rescue Wurmser and Mantua. Alvinci and Kostanovic will lead the main column, 26,000 strong, from Friuli to Bassano, then onwards to Mantua. Davidovic's corps, reinforced to 18,000, will retake Trento and push south through the Adige Valley. The two forces will link up at the earliest opportunity. Meanwhile, Wurmser, who can muster just 12,000 fit men from the Mantua garrison, will launch powerful sorties to pin down as many French units as possible. Napoleon, by contrast, has received very few reinforcements from France. His weary division.
Yeah, they're not giving him anything. So what you got is what you got, and you've got to make it work. And in the bigger context of what France is trying to do and kind of why Napoleon is here to begin with, this actually makes a decent amount of sense. When you look at it with hindsight, it doesn't, it looks bad for sure.
are suffering from shortages and sickness, and will be outnumbered on every front. Alvinzi begins his advance on the 22nd of October. The following day, the heavens open, drenching troops, swelling rivers, and reducing roads to mud. For the time being, Napoleon is content to observe the enemy struggle forward in such conditions, knowing the effort will exhaust his infantry and disrupt supplies. On the 2nd of November, fighting breaks out north of Trento, where Napoleon has ordered Vaubois to attack. He wants to keep Davidovich bottled up, but Vaubois is heavily outnumbered, and his attack fails. Vaubois begins pulling back to Caldiero, while Massena gives up Bassano and withdraws towards Vicenza. But now Alvinzi's advance becomes strung out, slowed by the heavy rain and poor fitness of his recruits. And it is against Napoleon's nature to remain passive for so long. As the Austrians cross the Brenta, he orders Massena to attack General Liptay's division at Fontaniva, while Augereau attacks Hohenzollern at Bassano. The French launched dozens of separate assaults. But for all their poor march discipline, the Austrian recruits stand their ground and fight hard. With around 3,000 casualties on each side, the Second Battle of Bassano is the bloodiest day's fighting so far in the Italian campaign, and a failure for Napoleon. Hours later, he receives dire news from Vaubois. During heavy fighting at Caldiero, some Croatian troops get behind the French line, triggering panic and a rout. Vaubois loses nearly half his division, killed, wounded, or missing, before he can regroup at Rivoli. The French are falling back on all fronts, and unless Napoleon can conjure something remarkable, he seems destined to suffer a major strategic defeat.
Yeah, like I said before, go support Epic History. They do great work with this stuff.
Napoleon's position is perilous, but his enemy's cautious pursuit affords him some respite. 4 whole days pass while Alvinzi and Davidovich coordinate their next moves. It's not a delay Napoleon would have tolerated if the shoe had been on the other foot. When the Austrians finally advance, it's bungled. Hohenzollern's vanguard approaches Verona to investigate reports of a French retreat.
Yeah, and when you look at this in the broader scheme of things, they have a rough march here. They get into position on the other side of the river. Everything's sort of coming together. It seems understandable to take a break, although for sure on the other side Napoleon would not have done that. But if you're going to take that break, you're going to kind of gather yourself before moving on. You can't have a misstep right after that. Like, I know I've talked about this in other videos, but as good as Napoleon is with a lot of different stuff, obviously quick movement being a big one, but as good as he is with a ton of different stuff, you can't make like simple mistakes. It just, he just crushes that. Missteps, miscommunications, he just crushes that. But he's going to find himself up against the wall here. And he's going to, actually I'll let them talk about it, but he's going to attempt to flank.
This isolated division is too tempting for Napoleon to ignore. He orders Augereau and Massena to attack. They inflict 400 casualties, but Hohenzollern escapes to a ridge near Caldiero. The next day, Napoleon orders renewed attacks. But conditions are atrocious. The French struggle.
Conditions are going to play a decently big role throughout this whole thing, and either they or I will talk about it once it gets to the actual, once it gets to what they're focusing on for this video.
All uphill into driving rain and hail, their boots slipping in the mud, under fire from Austrians dug in on the ridgetop. Around noon, Colonel Dupuy's 32nd Demi Brigade finally gets onto the ridge. It looks like the French may be able to lever the Austrians out of their position. But then, the Austrian army begins to arrive in force to support Hohenzollern's hard-pressed division. The French are in danger of being outflanked on both wings. They take up new defensive positions and hold the line until darkness, when Napoleon cuts his losses and orders a retreat to Verona. It has been an unequivocal French defeat, Napoleon's first in battle. The following day, he writes furiously to the Directory in Paris. He has no doubt that they are to blame for his defeat, for repeatedly failing to send reinforcements. We may be on the verge of losing Italy. None of the expected help has arrived. The army of Italy, reduced to a handful of men, is worn out. The heroes of Lodi, Millesimo, Castiglione and Bassano have died for their country or are in the hospitals. The men have nothing left but their reputation and their pride. We are abandoned in the depths of Italy. But despite his apparent despair, Napoleon has already devised a plan to strike back. A breathtakingly bold move that will spawn one of the greatest of Napoleonic legends. With the Austrians converging on Verona, Napoleon decides to risk everything on a daring surprise attack. Leaving Macquart to cover Verona, he will circle south with the rest of the army, cross the Adige River and swing north, threatening to cut Alvinci's lines of communication and capture his artillery, baggage and supplies. Such losses will force Alvinci to abandon his advance. Marching overnight, Augereau and Massena arrive undetected at Ronco. Augereau's men cross the Adige on a pontoon bridge and begin moving north. But with marshland on all sides, they have to...
Yep, and that's what I was getting at earlier. That's what I was hoping he would bring up. The land here without all of the rain is shit. And so with all of the rain, it's just almost impossible. So the fact that this is even the plan, like that he even was like, yep, this is what we're going to try to do, is sort of madness, because it's just nasty. The mud everywhere. It's total swampland.
Stick to the narrow, raised causeway, just 20 yards wide. And when they reach Arcole, where they must cross the bridge to continue north, they find it held by 2 Croatian battalions. Horribly exposed on the causeway, and under heavy fire, the French troops take cover behind its reverse slope. Reinforcements are sent up, but they too are pinned down by the weight of fire from the far bank. Colonel Lannes had discharged himself from hospital that morning in order not to miss the battle. He now attempts to lead a charge, but is hit in the leg. The fiery Augereau refuses to accept defeat and orders another attack. But his men are exhausted and demoralized, with 3 generals wounded. The attack at Arcole has stalled. When Alvinci hears gunfire from the south, he assumes the French are making a feint to divert him from his own planned attack on Verona. But then comes alarming news that the French have crossed the Adige in force and are behind his left flank. He sends 2 brigades to attack the French bridgehead and diverts Mitrovsky to reinforce Arcole.
God, and Napoleon is just so good at this. So this is a total shit show here. There's really nothing that can be done with Arcole with the way that the landscape is. Like, it's almost like a terrible plan, but it's in the most brilliant way possible, because he just shows up where you don't expect him. And so here, again, yes, obviously the thought process is it's a feint. Because of course he's not going over there to the swampland to try to cross. That doesn't make any damn sense. And then, right, it's a total freak out, because not only is he over there, but he's crossing in force. And so he's so good at just popping up where he's least expected, even in less than ideal circumstances.
Massena's division, moving northwest to protect the flank of the advance, runs straight into the Austrians at Bionde. At first, the Austrians have the better of it. But a disastrous friendly fire incident triggers panic, and Massena drives the Austrians back up the causeway. Napoleon is increasingly concerned by the hold-up at Arcole. If they cannot break through, Alvinci will have ample time to redeploy and prevent any advance.
And where are you going to go? That whole area is a giant swamp, so where are you going to go?
He now orders General Gueux to take 2 regiments, cross the Adige at Albaredo, and lead them up the eastern bank of the Alpone River to hit Arcole from the south. He himself rides to the bridge to try to get the attack moving. He finds hundreds of French troops sheltering behind the causeway, unwilling to face the Austrian fire. General Augereau grabs a standard and begins to advance. This highly romanticized depiction was painted 2 years later. "Grenadiers," he cries, "come and seek your color." In reality, none had the courage to follow him. Then, the commander of the Army of Italy himself draws his saber, picks up a standard, and runs forward. There is withering fire all around. Several men fall wounded. His aide-de-camp, Colonel Murat, is killed. Another aide-de-camp, a Polish officer named Sulkowski, recalls, "The soldiers saw him, and none of them imitated him. I was witness to this extraordinary cowardice, and I cannot conceive it." With the French infantry refusing to follow their officers, the assault on the bridge ends in abject failure. A well-timed Austrian counterattack drives them back down the causeway. In the rout, Napoleon's horse loses its footing. He tumbles into the swamp and has to be hauled out by his aides. That evening, General Gueux launches his attack on Arcole from the south. The defences are less formidable on this side, and his men fight their way into the village. Arcole, at last, has fallen. But that night, Geer's men are ordered to pull back. Napoleon is preparing to retreat. If, as he expects, Davidovich has continued his advance down the Adige Valley, Napoleon must withdraw now or face encirclement. His bold maneuver appears to have failed. Then, at 4 a.m., Napoleon receives a report from Rivoli that changes everything. Not only does Vaubois still hold the town, he hasn't even been attacked yet. Napoleon's line of retreat remains secure for at least a few days more. It's all the reassurance he needs. He immediately cancels his retreat and issues orders to attack.
Yeah, so you've got this situation where the Austrians are sort of scrambling because Napoleon shows up in a place where they don't expect, they don't know he's there, and just by him being there, it threatens the Austrian supply line. And so you have to make a move here. So the Austrians are scrambling, but then because the grounds are so brutal, it's really a terrible place for Napoleon to be. So obviously you don't have any French soldiers that really want to fight. There's not really any place for them to go because the land is so bad that any place you can walk with relative ease, those are the places you're getting shot. So it's kind of like a trench here, right? Where if you get up on top, you're probably going to get shot. So everybody stays down below, but just you have total chaos here. Chaos that was put in place by Napoleon being somewhere he wasn't expected to be. But then on the other side, you have the Austrians slow playing it, and that slow playing it plays right into Napoleon's favor, where he was basically beaten here. You basically had him beaten. It was a forced retreat. That's what it was going to be. And instead, he's getting ready to give you that work.
Napoleon has lost the element of surprise, and Dalvinci is now planning his own counterattack. Overnight, his troops edge forward. Provera to Belfiore di Porcile, Mitrovsky back into Arcole. Both armies are on the move before dawn. Massena sends skirmishers into the marshland. When the Austrians arrive, bunched up on the causeway, they make easy targets.
I feel like regardless of which side I was on, the Austrian or French side, the landscape makes this too unpredictable. I wouldn't like this going into it. There's too many things that could go poorly that you don't control. But the French, having just taken a beating, in this same sort of way, they're going to take advantage of it. They send guys into the marshes, and they're going to kind of try to do to the Austrians what was just done to them.
After a sharp fight in which an Austrian general is killed, Massena's men are driving the enemy before them. Augereau, however, cannot get close to Arcole. The causeway is still swept by Austrian musket fire and canister from across the Alpone. Napoleon orders troops to cross downstream at Albaredo, but the Austrians now have 2 battalions guarding the crossing point. French attempts to float or swim across the river come to naught. Day 2 of the battle ends in stalemate. Many soldiers have to camp amid the marshes and get what food and rest they can. Napoleon will try once more to break through. But he is running out of time. Davidovich, who by now has received several urgent requests from Alvinci to advance, finally attacks on the 17th of November. Vaubois' outgunned division breaks. The Austrians take Rivoli and 1,000 prisoners, and nearly capture Vaubois himself. With Davidovich on the move at last, Napoleon must force a decision at Arcole or retreat. The bridge at Arcole has proved too tough to crack. So Napoleon switches tactics. Augereau's division will cross the Alpone and attack Arcole from the south in force. A column is sent 10 miles south to cross at Legnago and then race back up the eastern bank to support him. Massena will advance up the causeway in support, while also protecting the left flank. That night, the French assemble a pontoon bridge over the Alpone. Augereau's division begins crossing before dawn. But at sunrise, Austrian gunners in Albaredo spot the bridge and score a hit, knocking it out of action. Only the 51st Demi Brigade is across, though it gamely begins to advance on Arcole. Massena's advance is also hamstrung by a broken pontoon bridge. To add to the crisis, the Austrians launch an attack on the fragile French bridgehead. Napoleon gathers every available gun to blast the Austrians, who fall back under a withering barrage.
Yeah, you kind of want to be playing defense here because you just can't move anywhere. So if you're going on offense, you're kind of going to have to put yourself in a vulnerable position.
The bridges are quickly repaired. But as the French advance, they encounter stubborn opposition on both sides of the Alpone. A bloody seesaw battle surges back and forth along the causeways. Neither side can deploy its troops, nor gain an advantage.
Who the hell is down there in a boat? Look at that dude, that one random guy out there on a boat all by himself. Dude, get the hell out of there.
Around 3 p.m., the French column from Legnago arrives, threatening to turn the Austrian flank. Just as Arcole seems about to fall, the Austrians launch a ferocious counterattack across the bridge. Brigadier General Robert is killed. His troops fall back in disarray. The panic is contagious. Augereau's men lose their nerve and fall back to the bridge. The moment of crisis has arrived. But while the enemy has...
And this is where Napoleon's great. That key moment of the battle, this is where he thrives.
Just used his last reserves, Napoleon can call on Massena's unengaged troops, including the elite 32nd Demi Brigade. Their sudden counterattack turns the tide. Massena's men sweep up the causeway, taking scores of prisoners, as Augereau's division resumes its advance. As they approach Arcole, Napoleon arranges a small ruse de guerre. 25 of his elite escort sweep in from the east, blowing bugles to feign a mass cavalry charge. In the evening light, it's enough to scare the remaining garrison into abandoning the village. As the French continue their advance, Alvinci orders his exhausted, demoralized army to retreat east, to Montebello, to protect its lines of communication. The 3-day Battle of Arcole has been a messy, bloody affair, with no great tactical flourishes. Napoleon's margin of victory is narrow, and a third of his army are casualties. But he has done enough, for now.
Yeah.
Alvinci may be withdrawing, but Davidovich remains a threat. The next day, Napoleon sets off at his customary pace with Massena's division to reinforce Vaubois.
Customary pace being he is literally a lightning strike.
Augereau takes a different route to threaten the Austrians' line of retreat. The confusion that follows between Alvinci and Davidovich verges on farce. Alvinci writes to his corps commander, informing him that he will support him by resuming his advance. But Davidovich, having heard of the defeat at Arcole and now directly menaced by Napoleon, is already retreating. On receiving Alvinci's letter, however, he tries to turn his army around, leading to such chaos that he has to immediately countermand that order and resume his retreat. The end result is that both Austrian armies are soon withdrawing. And with exquisitely poor timing, gallant old Wurmser chooses this moment to launch his supporting attack from Mantua. He does at least secure some much-needed supplies, at a cost of 800 casualties. It has been a...
Man, modern communication stuff is the best, right? Just wild.
bruising campaign for Napoleon. By some estimates, he has lost more men than the Austrians. He has suffered his first defeat in battle and won a costly, messy victory at Arcole. But he has beaten the odds and thrown back the enemy. What's more, his heroic conduct at the bridge at Arcole will soon take on a life of its own. Artists and pamphleteers turn a slightly embellished version of events into a sensational piece of personal PR that captivates France. With Napoleon's active encouragement, the world is witnessing the birth of the Napoleonic legend. A powerful force that will inspire loyalty and devotion for many years to come. For now, both armies settle into winter quarters, as December brings bitter cold and heavy snow to northern Italy. In Mantua, the Austrian garrison is near its limit. Starvation beckons, though Wurmser is determined to hold out to the last. The Austrians will have one last chance to save the city. A final offensive to decide the outcome of the war in Italy. A big thank you to...
Okay, so that was Napoleon in Italy, the Battle of Arcole by Epic History. Great video, great video. I've got a handful of Napoleon videos I'm going to try to get to, 4 or 5 of them. I've got to finish the, where was it? Is the Sweden and Mali series. I've got to get that done. So a handful of videos I've got to work on. But as always, like, comment, subscribe. Help me keep building the channel over here. And I will see you guys next time.